Hello there, a very warm welcome to some of the Seashores Birding Pals, and in this series I will be catching up with friends from the field that I've had the absolute pleasure of spending time with. We'll cover a variety of different subjects such as early beginnings, influences, the local patch, and of course some of the more exciting excursions they've been on. In episode 1 I'm going to be having a sit down and a chat with my old mate Mickey Avenell. Mickey and I go back to the late 70s where we met at school and where we both actually started our birding apprenticeship. Mick is a true humanitarian, wildlife enthusiast and fantastic birder. And we'll be talking about Mick's local patch, some of the incredible trips that he's been on, but we'll also cover a few of the more serious subjects such as pesticides, pollution and climate change. So without further ado, please sit back and I hope that you enjoy episode 1 of Birding Pals. So what's it like to be back in the UK now, Mick?
It's great to be back in the UK. Great to catch up with friends and family, and just a great time to be in the UK through the spring. You know, gorgeous flush of green new growth on the trees.
Yeah. And
just the call of common birds, blue tip, blackbird, robin. You know, it's just a delight.
And even today, like going to Staines, like getting passage movement, like stuff like little gull.
Yeah, little gull, wind chat
out on Staines Moor.
Brilliant. Lifer for me.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to get into it now. So tell us a little bit about how birding really, started for you.
Well, we've been living in a semi-rural area like Guildford. You've got birds all around. Dad was a big influence. He was always interested in nature in general, and was always pointing out birds when we're on our river and countryside walks. Yeah. And then I've just always had a passion for bird watching, and when in my youth, especially Richard,
all those years ago,
just instilled in me the passion for bird watching.
Yeah. And then I guess you went backpacking a lot, and so you were out in like Israel and India, and though you didn't have your bins, but you were always like aware.
Yeah, so I was always making mental IDs and sort of records. I know it's not really accurate.
Yeah, but you were aware and you were noticing stuff.
Just loving, travelling, going to new countries, new bird species and animal species.
Yeah.
So when I got my first pair of bins for Christmas one year,
nice,
from my mother.
Yeah. And what were they?
They were RSPB.
Oh
labelled binoculars, 8x40s.
Nice.
And that's when I really started to take it seriously, recording bird species and revisiting along the River Way, Send, Ripley, all around Burpham, the back forested area at Burpham.
Yeah.
And along the River Way through Guildford out to Godalming, beautiful countryside, beautiful habitat, and quite a few bird species.
Yeah, well that's I think it's probably a familiar story for lots of people. They get interested when they're a kid, and then adolescence sort of kicks in.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were we were starting off our birding journey at a time of it was sort of a period in the UK where music was a massive influence. There was so many, you had the old Teddy Boys, you had like the punk scene coming in,
the music genre clash.
Yeah, and it was. I always think it's like a vortex that you're spinning around in. And it's not literally, but it's like you're trying to grab hold of your tribe, like who you connect with through music and stuff like that. And I know, obviously, for me, I literally went from Shawaddy Waddy and the Bay City Rollers.
Really?
Or my nan and granddad were like, Val Doonican and the Glenn Miller Band, and then my parents were like Foster and Allen or country stuff like Don Williams and stuff. And then I had an older brother who luckily I got influenced by to get out of the Shawaddy Waddy period and jump straight into punk. And then it sort of went like mod revival, ska, like Trojan ska. But of course there was loads of stuff going on, so there was massive distractions for us to explore as well.
Yeah,
but that foundation, like the foundation of that interest in the natural world, sort of stayed with us, and then it developed when we developed that. Well, it doesn't happen like that for everyone, but it happened like that for us. So I now want to sort of jump forward quite a few years to when you were obviously in Australia. You settled into Sydney, I believe.
Yeah, Sydney, Australia, New South Wales.
Yeah, so that's the state, isn't it? New South Wales.
Yeah.
So then, was it a case of you started exploring your local patch? Is that how it happened? Or?
Yeah. Oh, initially, backpacking. So I was exploring, travelling around Australia in general. So a lot of good birds out there, interesting birds even in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
Like what we'd consider exotic, like sulphur-crested cockatoos just hanging upside down on lampposts.
Which is quite, I think it was from coming from the UK, I think that's quite bizarre.
Yeah, it certainly was, And of course all the beautiful parrot species just flying around in urban areas. It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
My local patch still today is Sydney Wetlands Park in Sydney Park, which is south of the CBD.
So giving us a timeline, so you've been there for how long?
33 years.
Yeah, so you've seen some changes?
Yeah, my local patch, Sydney Park, was started off as a landfill site up until 30 years ago, and they've restored the natural environment into a network of water lakes. There's a reservoir on top which actually captures and filters the rainwater runoff from the surrounding suburbs, filters through to the reservoir, and then through a series of reed bed filtration systems.
Yeah.
The water flow can be regulated to a degree, so it's taken 30 years. We've got some, and it's ongoing, but we've got some really good habitat there now, open to dog walkers, and there's an enclosed area of wetlands, which water birds especially are really attracted to.
Yeah.
They've been breeding.
So a few examples
so we have like cormorants on the water, we have breeding black swans, Pacific black ducks, Eurasian moorhens, goots, and then the summer visitors like Australian reed warbler, and grassbirds, tawny grassbirds, and some honeyeaters as well, migratory or migratory honeyeaters. So yeah, and occasional rarities like Australian bittern. You had a black-shouldered kite, not particularly rare, but for an urban area, it's
nice
quite a bird.
Nice
Pacific Bazza turned up last year, or two of them. It's also known as a crested hawk.
Oh. And so what about winter then? Is there a change then, or?
Yeah, there's changes. We see a few more waders. Black-winged stilt. Latham sniper is usually a big one, but I dipped out this year. But yeah, there's quite a few species that come through.
Turn my phone off because rare bird alerts coming through. So what about while you've been birding, have you come across anything unusual like on your patch?
Yeah, well the best one I think was the Australian bittern.
Right.
A few years ago, it was showing quite well for a couple of weeks and attracted birders from all over.
Oh, okay.
The Greater Sydney area.
Oh, wow.
So it's quite busy there for a couple of weeks. We had a flyover of osprey and a white-bellied sea eagle, which is good to see. Again, not particularly rare, but for the location.
Yeah.
And then we got our cryptic birds that, depending on the water level, show themselves occasionally. So the Lewin's rail and Balon's crake, which are usually skulking in the reed beds. Yeah. So our seasons are broader. So our summer and winter seasons are kind of extended rather a bit differently to the northern hemisphere. Spring starts in September, really.
Oh, right.
September, October, November. January, February, March for summer.
Yeah.
And
go
so on.
Yeah.
Partial migration.
Right.
And that usually, same as northern hemisphere, they head south in the springtime and back north in the autumn. So that's kind of reversed.
Yeah.
So a lot of the honeyeaters, some of the passerines, raptors like Pacific Bazza also are partial migrants.
Okay. Thinking about it is so during all this time, you spent all these years there birding and in and around not just your local patch but sort of semi-locally. Is there a nemesis for you? Because I do remember you talking to me about powerful owl.
Not particularly rare again, and I was hearing reports of powerful owl all over the place in Centennial Park, which is close to Sydney Park, in the woodland areas in the northern suburbs.
Right.
And I was chasing it for several years. Never could get that bird. It was really
I think
annoying.
we all can sympathise with that. I think we've all had one of them ones.
And then there was a report in the newspaper about decapitated ring-tailed possums appearing in the Botanic Gardens in Sydney. And that is evidence of one thing.
Wow.
Powerful owl.
Obviously the size of that, they are a powerful owl.
Yeah. So also a friend of mine, another birder, he alerted me. So we both went there. He'd seen it there before in past years. And we tried to find it, but with no success. Spent about 4 hours there.
Right.
But I went back on my own a week later. Was looking for this bird for an hour or so, and then a honeyeater species called the noisy miner, which is like a local name for it, were displaying territorial kind of aggressive behaviour, and usually that means one thing: predator. So I followed my nose, went to where all the commotion was, and sure enough, the powerful owl was there, but not just one, two. So I got two together,
and fairly good views.
Good views, roosting in a palm tree canopy. So palm trees were quite close together, creating cover for them. But I was able to lie on my back under the palm tree trunks and get really good views and some ordinary photographs. So they also take smaller mammals and marsupials from the ground as well.
Okay.
So sometimes they take fruit bats out of roosting.
Yeah.
So
that must have been, yeah. I know when I've had a nemesis, one of them being a white-tailed ptarmigan, it's just the greatest feeling in the world.
Elation.
So what's gonna take its place now?
Well, I've been chasing the grey falcon for a number of years now. Not really East Coast coastal. Arid interior is where you usually get them.
Yeah.
But it's the last Australian falcon I need on my
list.
list.
Wow.
So I've got all the other falcons. So so I'm determined to get that.
So that's your next. Well,
I've been out to its prime territory in northwestern southern Australia,
right,
which is a state in the south of Australia.
Right, where are you?
I've got peregrine, hobby, brown falcon,
everything but
all down there, kestrel.
Yeah,
black falcon down there, all in a week. But the grey falcon eluded me.
I think sometimes when things like that happen as well, you then end up seeing one, and then all of a sudden you've seen 4.
Yeah.
What about endemics? Is there anything specific to New South Wales?
Well, we only have one endemic. That's a rock warbler.
Okay.
Found in the Great Dividing Range, from the mid-north coast of New South Wales down to the mid-south coast of New South Wales. Not particularly rare in its correct habitat.
Right.
But they're kind of habitat specific birds. Yeah, and so massively impacted in the big bushfires of 2019 because it ripped right through their habitat. But I do believe they've made quite a good comeback. There's small pockets of them being reported in recovered areas.
Climatic changes?
Not climate changes specifically affecting birds. It's more of a cycle of drought and flooding,
right?
Which has always happened in Australia.
Yeah.
But they seem to be more intense, longer periods of drought and flood.
Yeah.
So at my local patch, when we were in the middle of the drought up until about 2018, there was more exposed feeding banks on the lakes.
Okay.
So we were seeing a lot more of the cryptic rails and crates and a lot more birds like spoonbills and stilts, snipes, water birds that were using this dependable water source and food source to feed, because the droughts and human impact, like irresponsible water use in agriculture, dried up all the wetlands in the west of the state.
Right.
So this was a reliable water source where they could come and feed. So we were getting quite good birds through the drought.
Oh, okay.
And then more recently, there's been a lot of rain.
Yeah.
So a lot of flooding in areas, which has broadened their habitat. So we have no exposed banks on the wetlands in the park.
Right.
So we're seeing less birds. So noisy miners, species of Honeyeater, very aggressive and territorial, but they feed mainly on nectar of flowers of trees,
right?
But they're insectivorous as well. But they've really adapted and taken advantage of urban man-made development. So a lot of gardens have, Australian native trees and shrubs,
ornamental planting
in their gardens,
right?
But with no ground cover for smaller birds. So the noisy miners are really attacking the smaller birds and driving them out of their habitat.
Ah, interesting.
So we've seen a declining
negative impact through them.
Things like superb fairy wren and the smaller bird species pretty much gone from the city. You hardly see them at all.
Right.
And just more and more increasing populations of noisy miners, which also drive a lot of the other Honeyeater species out as well.
Okay.
Also introduced species like Indian miners, not to be mistaken by noisy miners, which is spelled Miners, as in coal miners, because they've got a black face. And we know the Indian miner is like the minor bird species.
Right.
So introduced species that are also competitive with nesting hollows and food resources for our native species.
So what about the Ibis?
We first started seeing Ibis in the CBD around 1993.
What's CBD?
Central Business District in Sydney.
Oh, right.
So the city, basically.
Okay.
In the parks and in, green areas.
Just sort of turning up.
And I'm going, well, there's like an Ibis in the middle of the city. How about that, it was, again, the drought and irresponsible water use by agriculture dried up all their natural habitat.
Right.
And they're
sort of forced out then.
Yeah, they've come coastal looking for food and water resource. And over time they've adapted to feeding out of bins and, which isn't great for their diet. But anyway, their population growth has exploded over the years, and now they're considered a pest. And they've recently got the moniker bin chicken.
So they're called a bin chicken.
So you'd see them like just straddling bins and picking through the bin bags and feeding in that.
So when you say they're a pest, are they not a pest to the degree that they're controlled, or people?
Well, no, they're still protected. People consider them a pest.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't even know they're a native species.
Right.
But they pull the rubbish bags apart and spill the rubbish everywhere and stuff like that. But it's quite a sight to see. It's quite interesting. But there's also the native parrots, so especially rainbow lorikeets and sulphur-crested cockatoos have really adapted to urban environment as well. And their populations around the city, at least, are growing.
What about like pesticides? I remember, and I'm sure you remember, when we were kids, you would be driving out somewhere in the summer and the windscreen would be covered in insects, and there would be, houseflies and blue bottles and mosquitoes and daddy long legs and wasps and bees. And
summer evenings you would see the sky alight with golden insects catching the sun.
And it's, now
you don't see it.
It's staggering, the difference. And I mean, the impact. Have you seen an impact to that? Or
definitely a massive decline in insects in Australia. And again, you don't get many insects hitting your windscreen as you're driving along.
Right.
And just general drop in numbers. It's quite disturbing. Yeah, also we've had a mouse plague in Australia, so they've been given permission to use large amounts of a rodenticide. The active ingredient is bromadiolone.
Well, I'm glad you had to say that and not me. Okay.
Which it runs through the food chain and has a devastating effect on.
What, secondary poisoning?
Secondary poisoning. So anything that consumes that dead mouse or rat,
which could be
powerful owls.
Powerful owls.
Other raptors, all the owl species will consume dying. If there's any movement, they're going to be attracted to it. And of course, they're easy prey. And just start hemorrhaging and bleeding to death. It's really horrible death for them.
So these rodents, these mice, whatever, their population peaks or whatever, or is it affected by water level? Does that affect them?
Well, more rain and more food there is, and more agricultural success in growing grains. And just ideal breeding conditions.
So is there not an alternative to the way that they're? And I mean, one, is that under investigation, or is it still legal to do that? And two, is there an alternative?
I believe there is an alternative that doesn't have a secondary poisoning effect, but because it's not as effective, it doesn't kill the rats and mice quick enough, according to the agricultural bodies that want to use this poison. Yeah. So they just use the best product that they have, and unfortunately it kills a lot of Australian wildlife as well. Yeah. So reptiles, snakes and lizards also consume.
So is there anyone lobbying against this stuff, or is there any pressure? And
BirdLife Australia, which is the main birding group in Australia, have been lobbying against it. Petitions by a lot of different conservation groups, but with no real effect so far, no real success. Public awareness is quite high, but as far as the lobby groups are concerned, we haven't really had much success.
No, there. So, well, I hopefully in the future someone's gonna, maybe get more involved and try and come up with a solution, because it's not, obviously it's like like DDT in the in the 60s,
chemical like that in the environment.
No. There's,
especially around agricultural silos.
Yeah,
that grain's being used to produce food.
Yeah, it's really frustrating because there's so many examples of either misuse or ignorance or secondary poisoning from so many different, globally. It's having an effect, whether it be lead or whether it be pesticides or poison put down for coyotes out in North America, or poison carcass on the Serengeti. Obviously the accidental poisoning of vultures in India with diclofenac, which is obviously the anti-inflammatory that they give to the cattle, and with vultures they can consume anthrax and botulism and rabies, but it broke down their kidneys. And so it's a bit frustrating now we're in 2023, to think that we've got so much knowledge of this, but we don't seem to be doing very well at stopping it.
No,
so
it's bad.
So the British birder is quite globally known. Most non-birders refer to us as one of those twitchers, which obviously we know isn't always the case. But over here, obviously, we've got a fantastic network of county reserves, like the RSPB, Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, and with that comes a great amount of communication, places to go in different habitats. I mean, is there anything like that in Australia, like continent-wide or at a local level, or both? Or
both. Sort of there is, but on a lesser level, because the percentage of birders per population in Australia is quite a lot lower than it is in the UK. So they don't have as much funding as they would here. But we have hides and walking tracks, boardwalks, information boards, and good amenities at some birding sites, which is really good. And we have BirdLife Australia, which is the main bird watching group and conservation group, which is also a brilliant group. And then we've got our just wild tracks that we have to find via satellite or word of mouth.
Obviously, if there's bigger country, less birders, what's communication like? As in, bird forums, ebird. I mean, is that something
so
that
we
you
have
guys
ebird, we have an Australian rare bird alert, and a few different forums
on a local level as well, like sort of within New South Wales or Sydney or
we have Sydney Observers Birding Group, and just certainly amongst my birding community, we usually communicate via email.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so or text, but yeah. There's a small community in Sydney
but you do get to hear about stuff, and
But I would say eBird is the main forum that we use to share our sightings and communicate.
Yeah.
So and it's also a growing community. So
yeah, that's good. With some of our reserves, obviously we think about them as set up. I don't know, maybe we sometimes think about them that they're set up for our benefit to watch birds, but of course they actually, do a fantastic job at land management and creating specific habitat and managing that habitat for the birds. And, over here I know certainly there are areas where we have, lots of signage saying there's ground nesting birds and stuff like that. Maybe cordoned off areas. I'm not saying it always works over here because it doesn't. I think birds even in roped off areas still do get disturbed over here, but is that something similar over there?
Yeah, so we've got quite a few rare ground nesting shorebirds. Red cap plover is one of them, and there's a big conservation effort to preserve these bird nesting habitat and sites, usually dune areas on the beach.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But unfortunately, it's usually where people like to four-wheel drive, which is a popular pastime in Australia.
Right.
And so most people are responsible with it, but because these areas aren't enforced by law, some people disturb the birds when they're driving past or through, unfortunately, these nesting sites.
Yeah.
So we've seen a bit of that. And again, most dog walkers are responsible.
Right.
Will put their dog on leash in these areas. But again, some people aren't aware or ignorant or just ignore the request to keep their dogs away from these areas. It's a constant battle. But generally people do the right thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right on that. Okay, right. Well, let's we're going to come off the track of that now, and we'll have some talk a little bit about excursions within Australia. So southeast sort of Australia, is it?
Southeast Australia,
right?
About 2/3 of the way down the southeast coast.
Is there a few standout trips that you can sort of go over with us?
Yeah, so Tasmania I went to for the first time about 18 months ago. So, and just a beautiful environment, lovely place to visit, and some outstanding birds too. I managed to get about 110 species down there in 10 days. So
and some new species
species too, yeah. So some endemics down there. So strong-billed Honeyeater was one of them. Dusky robin is another that we got down there.
Okay.
Some pelagics too. So we got little penguin and shy albatross and wedge-tailed shearwaters, often known as mutton birds. Also like grey goshawk and wedge-tailed eagles, which are a little bit larger than the ones on the mainland. They've evolved to be slightly larger birds, which is interesting to see.
Whenever you see an albatross, for me, it always feels like you're in a really wild place. Yeah. Did you see a Tasmanian devil?
I did. Unfortunately, it was dead on the side of the road, but but other really nice animal and mammal and marsupial species.
Okay.
It's good.
Yeah.
Also, I had a trip down to central Victoria on the southeast coast of Australia.
So how far is that ish from Sydney?
It's about a 12-hour drive.
Oh, okay. It is a fair distance.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But again, slightly different terrain and habitat, and with some new species down there, especially the robin species, which come down from the mountains in the winter.
Right.
Obviously, climate's a bit warmer out of the mountains. So yeah, flame, scarlet, blackcap robin.
Well, they all sound wonderful.
Yeah, they're beautiful
Probably,
little birds.
yeah.
But some other, amongst other species down there. Which brings us to my new favourite birding spot. It's called Coopernook Wetlands, which is near a city called Taree, which is 4 hours north from Sydney.
Okay.
So north central coast of New South Wales.
Yeah.
And just a great birding spot. Over 120 species recorded. I've got about 72 of those in my first 4 trips there, but really good combination of mixed habitat, brackish wetlands, you've got tidal wetlands, you've got river habitat, you've got grassland, and you've got woodland.
Wow.
All within it takes you approximately 2 hours to walk around these sites, at a leisurely pace, observing
and
birds.
you can experience each of that habitat type within the 2 hour.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
And I usually go around twice.
So you're always going to get a different group of birds within that.
Yeah,
well. And some of some of the species.
So some of the new species there, again, not particularly rare, but now I've found them there. I see them all the time. So varied Satella, which is a nuthatch species, striped Honeyeater, unusual looking Honeyeater species, but I've got Australian Marsh Harrier there. I'm hoping to get blackneck stork there. I haven't got that yet, but it's been reported there a few times.
I sort of like that though. Sometimes I like, I think we've been birding long enough that sometimes you have to earn your birds.
Yeah. But I always get something new every time I've been there, which is 4 or 5 times now.
Yeah.
So I've got Jacana there, which is on the very southern limits of its habitat.
When I think of Australia, I think of Wedge-tailed Eagle, Cassowary, and Lyrebird.
Yeah.
Have you seen these species? Obviously, I know you've said you've seen the wedge-tail, but could you speak to us a little bit about each of them, sort of briefly?
I've been fortunate to see all of those species. Cassowary, amazing looking bird, largest flightless Australian bird, found in far north Queensland, so Cape York Peninsula and around the Daintree rainforest.
Right.
So yeah.
Are they sort of a shy bird? I mean, just because sometimes a bird is big doesn't necessarily mean it's always that easy to see.
They some individuals but become conditioned to human activity around the tourist spots.
Okay.
So there's one that hangs around like the camping area
and picks up.
Yeah, unfortunately people throw bits of fruit and stuff like that, so it's become conditioned. But they are quite dangerous birds, so
I would think so.
People need to be aware of that.
Right.
But amazing bird to see, very brightly coloured, blue flesh on its head, with a red comb on its head, like a cask comb. And just a stunning looking bird.
Wow.
But restricted to a relatively small area, unfortunately, and that area habitat is shrinking, as well.
Through development or through
development and agriculture,
right?
Mainly.
Yeah.
Not so much development, more agriculture.
And they seem, you'd think a big bird like that would want some sort of large territory. I don't know.
Well, they do need large territory because, they're diet is mainly fruit, so they have to cover a lot of ground to find the tree bearing fruit.
And enough of it, because they must have a big...
Yeah, but like crucial
appetite.
in distributing and fertilising, germinising the fruit seeds. So they're critical in the development of the plant life out there as well. Wedge-tailed Eagle, always, an iconic bird as well. Often seen in Western Sydney, over agricultural land, soaring high in the sky on the thermals. Don't really see them around Sydney. Travel a bit out to Western Sydney, you see them occasionally.
Right.
But mainly in out western New South Wales and in forested areas. Quite a healthy population. Yeah, unfortunately, some sheep and lamb farmers still persecute them in fear of them taking lambs.
Right.
Which has been recorded, but it's it's a very rare occurrence where they will actually take a lamb. So they will eat a dead lamb, but they very rarely attack and kill live lambs. So it's just an unnecessary persecution of a beautiful bird of prey. And also, unfortunately, a lot of them get hit on outback roads because they eat the roadkill. Right. Usually kangaroos that have been hit on the side of the road, and because they're a large eagle, they need to take off in a headwind, and it's a laborious sort of movement to get them airborne, and it's quite a slow takeoff. So unfortunately, vehicles don't slow down for them, and often they fly in the path of vehicles and get killed that way. So. But generally, I think their population's stable in the right habitat. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yes, and then the lyrebird, amazing bird of mimicry, as probably most people are aware.
Almost always remember that bird from the David Attenborough show, and I remember the sound that it made of a chainsaw and the clicking of the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been fortunate enough to see lyrebird on numerous occasions, mainly in the Blue Mountains National Park and the Walgett Valley National Park, northwest of Sydney.
Yeah, and heard them.
One occasion I was walking through the forest and I heard the call of a gang cockatoo, which is quite distinct and recognisable.
Yeah.
And I'm looking into the canopy. Where is that cockatoo? I don't see it. And as I approached to where the lyrebird was, I realised this sound was coming from the ground. So I've explored the undergrowth near to where the sound was coming from, and sure enough, there was the lyrebird singing its heart out, but it was singing the call of a gang cockatoo.
Are they approachable? Are they are they shy? Or
they are a little bit shy, but you can.
Yeah, you get
if you move slowly, and once you've seen them, if you keep still, they're generally comfortable with you being there.
Right. So, not that I want to, but I'm going to come out of Australia now and come all the way back to the UK, because over the last however many years, me and you have met up and gone on little birding excursions to various places in the UK. What about standout birds for you whilst you've been back on these trips?
Oh, well, certainly starts with the Nightingale.
Which was 4 or 5 days ago?
Yeah. It was
Pulborough Brooks, RSPB Reserve, so that's West Sussex.
And one of the first birds we saw and heard.
Yeah.
And what a display. It was right there singing for us, staring straight at us through the binoculars. It was like, I know you're here, and I'm just going to sing my heart out for about 15 minutes. So Dartford Warbler.
Dartford Warbler.
Iconic. Thursley Common in Surrey.
When was that? Was that
yesterday?
Yeah. Well, no, it was yesterday. But when was the first? When you got it as a lifer?
Oh yeah,
that was 3-4 years ago. No, 4 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 2017, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So same location, but 4 years ago.
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Right, 5 years ago.
Iconic birds that I'd seen in my Collins book of birds that I've had since I was a child. That I really thought I'd never get to see, you know, and now with an expert guide, being able to, get these birds, these iconic birds I always want to see, and just a pleasure to see.
I mean, I remember seeing that bird in the Ladybird book. I think it was Heathland, and it just seemed so far out of my reach when you're a kid. And of course you've got the fact that one, they were highly prized for their eggs when egg collecting was, at its height. Because they're not migrants, they have to go through winters here, and of course that then influences their numbers. So their population does fluctuate. But there is some great heathland round here, as you know. We're very lucky to have that heathland, and it's managed very well. And they are a skulky, scratchy song. They're difficult to see, but when they show... One
presented yesterday on top of a dead tree, and it was like a textbook image, wasn't it?
You spotted it. Is an absolute side-on profile of Dartford Warbler. So yeah, great choice. I agree, 100%.
The second one on Thursley, 5 years ago, was also the hobby. Of course. Beautiful little falcon. Yeah. Zipping around chasing dragonflies.
Yeah, African migrant. Yeah. Lovely red on the legs and facial pattern.
Yeah.
Many years ago, when I was ringing, we actually had a hobby nest that we were protecting. We believed it was. I mean, we could have been wrong, but when we inspected the nest, we found spike holes in the tree that a tree climber would use.
Wow.
So whether we were being paranoid or whether we were justified, we decided to protect. We had a watch over this hobby nest. There was one incident where someone was heard running away, and they could hear like clinking of carabiners and things like that. So I think we'd be very naive to think that egg collecting still didn't happen.
Yeah.
But we fortunately protected that nest. I ringed the young, and the young fledged. So it was a good
job, brother.
It was a good end to that story. But yeah, they are a fantastic bird.
Then we go to Bittern and Marsh Harrier at Minsmere, Suffolk. Also,
I do remember this.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Just incredible experience. Firstly, to see the Marsh Harrier just like gliding over the top of the reed beds. Or we saw 3 or 4 actually within an hour's time frame or something.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And what a really incredible experience. As incredible was the Bittern that we saw from the hide at Minsmere.
Which was called Bittern Hide.
Bittern Hide. But some really good views of the bird over about 15 minutes. That was after the initial 15 minutes I spent trying to see the bird, which is like right in front of me. People were saying, it's there, it's right there. Yeah. And I couldn't see it. It was very frustrating until finally...
got on it.
Yeah, my eyes adjusted to the reed beds and I saw it move, and then there it was. It like appeared out of nowhere apparently, but according to all the other birds, it's been just there. You know,
it's I think we've all experienced that. You know, where someone was. I mean, last year when I went up to see that red-tailed shrike up in Bempton Cliffs, I went into the farm to see it, and there was this like massive long line of birders and photographers, and they were all like staring, and there was a hedge in front of us. It wasn't very far away, but there was no way I was thinking the bird was actually in there. So I was looking beyond and in the back field at the hedge back there, and everyone's sort of, you can hear cameras clicking and everyone's going, oh, and I couldn't see it, and I was like, I didn't want to ask. I thought, am I the only idiot who can't see this bird? And it's like, come away from my scope.
Got your eye in.
Looked at what everyone was looking at, and I was like, it was right there. So, you know, that's nothing like a bittern is so, you know, you've really got to, like, just get that shape right, and you know, and sometimes I've had it where someone's been next to me and they can see it and I couldn't see it, and so it's just when your eyes adjust. Yeah. But when they did adjust, you got it, and you were very happy.
I was a very happy birder.
Yeah.
The bearded tit, also at Minsomere. We didn't get to see it, we were hearing it.
Yeah,
those little pings.
Yeah.
And we knew they were in there, like just metres away. But it just wasn't showing, was it? And we waited for 40 or 50 minutes or something, and just wasn't to be.
And those windows of opportunity, like, not only if you're just down for the day on that and you hear it and you don't see it, but if you're down for the day and you're not going to have that opportunity again for another 5 years because you live in Australia, it's even more tormenting.
Yes. So I did have to wait 5 years until I visited All Marshes on Tuesday.
In Kent, yeah.
In Kent.
Yeah.
And after a few frustrating minutes, up they come. And we got several really good views of male and female. Saw the teardrop moustache, and that was like, you know, ID right there in front.
Well, they're a bird that, you know, they just look like someone's decided to paint something incredible, and like, you know, they don't even look real. But it is worth, you know, when you get those moments with these birds, they're just fantastic. Okay, I'm just going to change track now. A little bit of fun. So if there was a place that you could go birding in the world for like a couple of weeks, where would it be? Where would you go?
I think at this point in time I'd like to visit southwest United States, namely Arizona, New Mexico area, to get some of those beautiful passage birds making their way up the Pacific to the Pacific Northwest, you know.
I think I couldn't agree more. They are, I mean, Arizona as a destination is quite iconic in the birding world in, you know, the States. Having lived over there for quite a lot of years, I've ogled over the birds of southeast Arizona. It's a great habitat, isn't it?
Yeah, that's somewhere I've never been. So just the habitat and the landscape is incredible, as well as other wildlife.
The cactuses, and the history, the oak apiary.
Yes, everything. But especially birds.
Yeah. I mean, they got, like, you know, these giant sky islands, and so you go from almost like from, well, desert to, you know, boreal forest. Not only that, but it's got these groups of birds that, you know, certainly for me and for you, I know, is, you know, the cactus wrens and the orioles, the hummingbirds.
Hummingbirds, especially for me, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
I just find it incredible given their size, you know, like that migration from South America and Central America, all the way up through Arizona, California, Oregon, Washington State,
and with some of them up as far as Alaska. It's and especially when they're they've got to do that push across the Gulf of Mexico, and if you're hitting an oncoming wind, and that's why
such a tiny bird, and nectar feeders as well. It's not like they can feed while on the wing. They have to find the food source, and
I speak. They.
Well, they do feed on the wing, don't they? Of course they do, but while they're migrating.
They'll, obviously places like High Island in Texas is so good because really they're exhausted, to be honest, and they just want to land. But going back to Arizona, some of the for me, the elegant trogon is my bird
target species.
It's one that it's still, I know it's seen there regularly now each spring, but it still holds that. It's a bit like the Dartford Warbler when you're a kid. The elegant trogon, that's what it's like for me, because it's been a bird that I've looked in the book, and when I was living out in Canada, I read Wild America, Roger Tory Peterson and James Fisher going across America, Kingbird Highway, The Feather Quest, The Big Year, all of these books, and some of them refer to this area, southeast Arizona, as just a fantastic place to bird. So a little bit more fun. 3 birds in the world that you could see. What would they be?
Well, let's keep this topical. It changes all the time, but at the moment, I think Californian Condor would be good, and given our next desirable location,
Arizona,
it might be doable. Anna's Hummingbird, which passage migrant, so that's doable as well, and it'd be just amazing to see a bald eagle, which is also American species, North American species. So
funny that though, isn't it? All North American. I mean, California Condor with its history, the retrap program, and then the re-release, because of the secondary poisoning, and that seems to have gone really well. That would be a lifer for me, for sure. California Condor, and that would, north of, way north of Tucson, Grand Canyon area, you can get them there. Anna's, they're incredible gorget and such a hardy bird. The information we've got on them, overwintering up in places like British Columbia, probably feeding from nectar feeders that people have put out, and they, I know that some of them keep them sort of to a temperature that they don't freeze, so that's they've been able to access that, so that's a sort of a habit that they've it's sort of discovered. It's like short evolution, so the nectar feeding generation.
So they're adapting to overwinter because of artificial feeding stations that sustain them through a Canadian winter. That is just incredible.
I know, it is bizarre. I suppose. I guess I hadn't thought about it. Living out there, I suppose I started to get used to it because it was sort of happening more and more. I mean, it's not the same thing, but it's just like, blackcaps. More and more of them are overwintering here in the UK. They're being noticed more because they're coming to feeders, but I don't think
it's that climate change, or because there are more and more people putting out feeders.
Yeah, maybe, and maybe it's learnt behaviour. Because it's like, I think we believe. I think the idea, or at least for me, that's what I thought it was. I thought that the overwintering blackcaps in the UK were birds that have bred in the UK and have decided not to go. They're like, we're going to stay here.
If they don't have the pressure of hunger to drive them south because they are getting food from an artificial food source, then they might not necessarily get the urge to
right.
fly south.
There is evidence now through ringing that I think it's to do with it's a more eastern population of blackcaps. They're actually moving west, or some of them are, to overwinter rather than going south. So there's lots of work going on with blackcaps, but this is the thing with sort of research through ringing studies, through ebird, through whatever. We're learning more and more. It's easy to make conclusions on stuff, you know, on face value.
Yeah. But
when it's looked at and dissected, I mean,
we need the raw data.
I mean, things like even like peregrines, like urban peregrines, like hunting at night, taking nightjar and snipe and little grebe and, you know, woodcock and stuff like that. It's happening, and it's like, did this, you know, is it the light pollution doing it? Is it? I love the fact that the more and more we're digging here and we're finding out more answers, and hopefully that will go a long way towards, you know, conservation and protection. The more and more people are involved. And so bald eagle.
I love eagles anyway.
Yeah, and that's a good one.
Yeah.
They I was very lucky to see them on Vancouver Island. They were breeding on Vancouver Island, so I got to see lots of them, and they, you know, would turn up in numbers, particularly during the herring spawn. So we would get the Pacific black brant that a lot of the popular, I mean, some of them are overwintering in BC now, but a lot of them would move up from Baja, Mexico, move through, feed up. A staging post is, you know, Vancouver Island, Vancouver, where the herring spawn, and they put on a lot of weight eating the herring spawn before they push up to Eisenbeck Lagoon and then onto the breeding grounds on the tundra. But during that time, lots of other birds get involved in, you know, eating the herring spawn, diving ducks and gulls and terns and things like that. And of course that brings in the predators. And so you would see quite a few, you know, you would be looking out across all the Pacific black brant and sea ducks, and then all of a sudden everything would get up, and in the middle of it would be this bald eagle just coasting through. It was quite something to see. Yeah. So yeah, three really good choices there, I think, and of very different birds but iconic species. So to round this up, what would you say you get out of birding? What, you know, how would you describe, what does it mean to you being out in the field?
It just brings me joy. It grounds me. It clears my head. You know, feeds my interest.
Yeah.
And my desire to see new species. Just like, you know, it's just an amazing pastime. You know.
Yeah.
It's being out with friends like yourself and meeting other people in the birding community, and just a desire to be out in the field, learning, observing, you know.
And when you're out there, you know, when you're, you know, I've got out on my own lots, and so do you, and you know, it's not like, I know you've said to me before, it's not all, you know, well, yeah, it's fun to twitch a bird and stuff, but it's never been about that for you, is it? It's about discovery and rediscovery, isn't it?
Yeah. Like the greater experience of bird watching, it brings a lot of different aspects into it.
Yeah.
I often see lots of other wildlife as well as birds, you know, and just appreciating the value of the environment and habitats that we live in. And yeah, we need to protect this, and you know, understanding it and knowing about it will go a long way to protect.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. So anyway, well, that was a bit of a marathon sit down, but it was a good one. It was a first for Seashores Birding Pals. So I hope you've all enjoyed this talk. It was our first go at it, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed Mick's company. You know what to do if you're enjoying the channel. Please just hit the subscribe button and the bell notification, and let you know of any other upcoming videos. And until then,
happy birding,
and we'll see you in the field.